Got it.
Uh, Hi, Liz. We're here today to start our ASAA oral history project, and thank you very much for being the first person to take part in it with us. So we're very glad to be able to talk to you today.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. No worries.
Okay, so what we're trying to do in this series is to talk to some of the people who have been involved in the life of not just the association, but the field of Asian studies in Australia over a long period of time, in various capacities, and to learn more about them, but also to through the interviews to sort of get a stronger and a sort of more interesting picture, I think, of the field uh, of Asian studies in Australia. So, just to start off with, then, I was wondering if you can tell us your origin story in Asian studies. How did you sort of get on the path to the field? When and where was that? How did it come about?
Yeah, well, I think there are two answers. The first is the technical answer, where I did a Bachelor of Arts, majoring in Asian Studies. And so I suppose from an academic perspective, that's where my training and my knowledge in that sphere sort of uh, developed. But I think that's probably not the full story. My mother is Indonesian and I grew up in Indonesia until I was 14 years old. And my parents were very keen travelers, so we traveled to a lot of other countries in Southeast Asia. My parents were very insistent that me and my older brother spoke Indonesian and that Indonesia was very much a part of our, I guess, identity and our heritage. And so in moving to Australia, um, my parents were still like quite insistent that that connection was maintained. So um, I they continued to speak Indonesian at home. I did Indonesian for the HSC. And I think when I got to university, I was like done with Indonesian for the first couple of years. Um, but then slowly found my way back to it. And that's sort of what's propelled me post undergraduate to stay engaged with Asia as a region, and also with my own identity as somebody who is of Asian heritage.
Great. No, thank you. That's a nice that's a story that I suppose some people might resonate with them, others not so much. But that's a very great sort of start. Thank you. Um, I suppose that has in a way sort of perhaps shaped your answer to the next question. But I was
Mhm.
also wondering if there were any particular sort of books or films or encounters or events, so again, that may or may not be relevant to you, that was particularly influential to you, I suppose, in making you an Asianist.
Indonesianist. Okay, so I think one of the things, and this is not a book or a film, but it is an encounter.
Hmm.
So I had a lecturer in my undergraduate who was the my Indonesian studies lecturer, Dr. Keith Fulcher, who was amazing. I think I can directly trace my ongoing interest in Indonesia and language and culture to those undergraduate Indonesian studies classes that I had with Keith. Um, I actually had lunch with him last weekend, so we're still
Great.
in
Yeah.
touch. So I think that was huge for me. And I think particularly as an undergraduate, where in a lot of classes you're sort of a nameless face. Um, I think studying language and particularly studying Indonesian, which was a very small cohort, I really felt like um, I was part of a community, which I genuinely can't really say about any of the other courses that I took at university.
Mm.
Um, even when you get to third year, you're one of like 30 or 40 students.
Yeah.
Our Indonesian class was, I think, in my final year around 8 students. And so we were very close, and that was really motivating for me to have that sort of um, inspirational teacher and somebody who clearly just was really keen to impart his love of the culture and the language. And during that time, we actually studied. So in the final year, we had to read 2 books for Indonesian studies, and we read a book called Saman, spelled Saman, by an author called Ayu Tami. And that was the first book that I ever read from start to finish in Indonesian, which was a massive sense of achievement at the
Mm,
time.
mm,
But it was also just an amazing book. It was sort of this new wave feminist literature that kind of came out of the post New Order period. And it just really opened my eyes to how language can be used, and language and creativity can be used to sort of put forward these really um, important and difficult issues, particularly political issues.
mhm,
So, I mean, the book itself is sort of, I mean, I'm not going to go into what it's about, but it sort of deals with um, issues of gender dynamics, gender inequality, um, sort of the authoritarian power that the military had at the time, and what that meant for people, particularly ordinary people. And it was just a beautiful book. It won a lot of prizes. So I'm
mhm.
not saying it like I'm not, um, saying anything that's particularly out there. But I think that book really did inspire me to keep on with learning more about Indonesia.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, other than that, I think the more that I travel there and the more that I see different countries and different parts of Asia, the more I'm like, oh, I want to go back. I want to know more. I want to learn more about this part of the world that is, I guess, kind of not necessarily on a lot of people's radars. Culturally, I mean, economically, yes, but culturally, maybe not as much.
Sure. No, thank you. And so, and was that the ANU that you did your undergrad, or was
No,
Sydney, or
at the
which was
University of Sydney.
in Sydney? All right, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you finished that, and then what did you do next? Did you proceed to more study, or did you go out and do something else?
No, I worked for the public service. I got a
Right.
graduate
Okay.
position in the public service. So I was there for a couple of years. I did a stint at the High Commission in Bangladesh.
Hmm.
And then I think realized that the public service was not for me. I think that there comes a fork in the road for people who've done the graduate program where they're like, so I opted out of the public service at that stage. And then I went into development consulting, and I did a bit of work in Bangladesh and then was in Afghanistan for 2 years. And then
Right.
after that, I came back to Australia. So that was probably a break of about 7 or 8 years, maybe.
Hmm.
And then I came back to actually to do honors because I hadn't done honors.
Hmm.
And I was toying with the idea of doing a PhD. So I came back to the University of Sydney and did honors in Indonesian studies with Michelle
Hmm.
Ford.
Michelle, right. Okay. And I suppose you would have had a chance to write an honours thesis then, so
Yes.
uh, sort of at that time. So what did you do?
My honors thesis, oh gosh, that's going back.
We didn't
My
we didn't
honors
prep for this, did
thesis,
we? So,
no, but I can vaguely remember it. It was one year of my life. My honors thesis was on post-conflict corruption in Aceh in Indonesia.
all right, great. So, and how long after honours did you decide to take the step and go into PhD?
I think it was or not the next year, but the year after, a year. So I took a year off. I went to the Middle East and traveled around Palestine, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and Egypt, which was yeah, amazing. I'm so thankful that I was able to get over to that region, especially before everything went down in Syria. So I did that for a year and then I came back and started the PhD.
Uh, so Liz, I wanted to ask about your PhD and this is in a way your first sort of full scale version of research in Asian studies. So I was wondering if you can tell us about uh, how you went about that body of work, what skills and knowledge you needed to complete it.
Yeah, sure. So my PhD was on, well, it ended up being on um, corruption and money politics in Indonesian elections, but that was not actually what I had intended to study when I first started the PhD. So I think having worked in a number of places and also having studied Southeast Asian and Indonesian history, corruption was something that was really interesting to me. As a sort of social phenomenon and how people rationalize it, justify it, how they think about it, whether it's something that can be related to culture. So those were sorts of issues that I was really interested in, and that's what I shaped my PhD around. So I think my my PhD kind of went off track in a couple of ways. Um, so the first thing that happened, which was amazing, was that I got an Endeavour Award to go to Indonesia and to live there for 12 months, fully funded, which was not something that I had factored in when I first started the PhD, but it was amazing. So that gave me the opportunity to kind of spend a full 12 months in Indonesia without worrying too much about finances. Um, and it also gave me the opportunity to shape a PhD project that involved a lot of travel, which I think would have been much more difficult if I didn't have the funding. So what I ended up doing, oh, and the other thing that happened was I got typhoid in my first in
Uh,
my first couple of months in Jakarta. So that knocked me out for a few months. So I had to sort of
mhm,
push everything back, but persisted anyway. So I think the 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 initial um, I guess intention of the project was to talk to politicians about how they understood corruption and how they understood, the morality of, right and wrong and how that relates to the actual legislation and how that relates to the way that parties govern themselves in Indonesia. But as I got kind of into it and I spoke to more and more people, I thought actually what's really interesting about this is the personal journeys that people seem to go on because
mhm,
it seems like there's this trajectory where people were running for office with all these good intentions, and then they get into parliament or they get into some kind of political position, and then they start to have to make decisions and
mhm,
find themselves in compromising positions. So I thought, well, it would be so great if I could do a political ethnography of this.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and that's what I did. So I found some politicians who let me follow them during their campaigns. And I got to see in real time the kinds of situations that they found themselves in, the kinds of, I guess, interactions that they would have with voters, with citizens,
mhm,
but also with gatekeepers and people with different types of authority, like local government officials or party officials or even business people or religious figures, these kinds of people who in Indonesia they carry masa. they have like a base that they can
Hmm.
bring to a particular candidate. So they end up being gatekeepers for that reason. So being able to kind of follow them and see their interactions, sit in on the meetings, and then debrief with them afterwards about, what was happening, how they felt. Um, so yeah, that was what my PhD ended up being. And I ended up spending about 18 months in Indonesia, which was fantastic. And yeah, so that was my first experience. I managed to also cultivate the project in a way where I had field sites on 3 different islands. So I was able to sort of go between the different islands, um, which was really great for me because I grew up in Jakarta. That's sort of the part of Indonesia that I'm most familiar with. So being able to go to other parts of the country and spend several weeks um, over a period of time was also quite eye-opening. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, it does wonderfully. Thank you. And so, how long ago did you finish that your thesis and everything? Sorry.
So the thesis, when did I submit? 2015.
2015. All right. So that's a decade ago. You finished that big body of
God,
work.
it is a
So,
decade ago.
so no pressure. So now, if we fast forward to 2025,
Mhm.
and you have to introduce yourself, what would you say is what is your expertise? How do you usually describe yourself? And is it still harking back to that PhD work, or is it something else now? Or uh,
I think it depends on the audience sometimes, doesn't it? I mean, if I'm in an interesting situation now where I've moved institutions a couple of years ago, and previously I was in um, the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre, and sort of with cross affiliation with the School of Languages and Culture. Um, so there, I guess, being an Indonesianist or being somebody who has an expertise in Asia and from an area studies perspective was quite normal. Now I'm in the School of Social Sciences at UNSW. I'm the only person who does anything related to Indonesia. Um, and so I guess now if people ask me, what is my academic identity, I'm probably more likely to say a political scientist because that's
mhm.
my sort of training, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and the courses that I teach are not Asia specific now. So I teach a
Mhm.
theoretical background for master's students in public policy and governance. Um, so yeah, that's been a bit of a shift. But I guess at heart, I do feel like the most honest way to describe myself is as an Indonesianist, um, because that's genuinely what I know.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crossover and parallels with other countries. And I guess theoretically, theories that you use to explain certain things in Indonesia can be used in other places or can be used to analyze what happens in other places. Um, but yeah, almost all of my research is focused on Indonesia as well.
Yes, as you say, I think it's that classic sort of shifting, as I said, very much depends on audience. There's how you describe yourself at a conference, an Asian Studies conference, as opposed to in your to your employer, sort of when there's all those internal processes too, and we're often grappling with
Yeah,
that. And if you're as you say, not necessarily employed in Indonesian studies per se.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Um, okay, so if we come back to sort of relatedly or extending from that, I suppose, uh, can you name a particular book or article or other sort of publication that you think best reflects your work and if you like, where you how you most define yourself as a researcher?
Um, yeah, sure. So I wrote a monograph out of my PhD research, which probably, I guess, most accurately captured what I was doing for 4 years. Um, uh, plus all the additional years that I spent thinking about how to turn it into a book. So that's called The Candidate's Dilemma, and it was
Hmm.
published by Cornell University Press in 2022. But I think my focus has sort of shifted since the PhD, as it does naturally. And I have an article that came out, I want to say 2023, 2022, 2023, on policy incoherence in tobacco control in Indonesia, which sounds kind of esoteric and obscure, but it's sort of my new research focus. So I have a DECRA which is focused on the politics of tobacco control in Indonesia, and it's I mean, I would challenge anyone to give me a national context that is more complicated than Indonesia when it comes to tobacco control. It's very complicated there. And yeah, so I wrote this article with a co-author from the University of Indonesia and Harvard University, and it's just basically looking at all of the different ministries that are involved in regulating tobacco and why it doesn't work. And it's sort of a big picture overview. So my current research kind of stems from trying to understand that incoherence better.
Great. Oh, fascinating. That's I know a tiny bit about that topic in a Korean context, and these are it's really worth doing. Is all I can say. So glad to hear that glad to hear that you're getting the chance to sink your teeth into it. Uh, Ken, you probably answered this question in part already, but I was just wondering if you could sort of also tell us more about how Asia and Asian studies actually does, or even Indonesian studies does feature in your current role. I mean, you've sort of mentioned it probably in the teaching context,
It
but
doesn't.
what about
Really,
the yeah,
officially it
yeah,
doesn't.
not at all.
Um, well, I mean, uh, yeah, I think in my current context, it it's been a bit of a psychological shift because
Mm,
my previous role at the University of Sydney was very much focused on Indonesian studies. I taught language, and I taught Southeast Asian politics there, and I was part of the management team at the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre. So everything that I did was about Southeast Asia. And yeah, that was the real focal. That was kind of the thread that,
mm,
drew everything together, everything that I did together. I don't have that in my current role. So um, I think I have to actively find ways to insert um, Indonesia into the content that I teach, which is which I do, but I also have to be very, um, I guess, cognizant that most of the students that I teach, particularly in the master's course, are not very familiar with the Indonesia context, and that's not by doing a
mm,
public
mm,
policy
mm,
master's at UNSW. So I have to kind of find a way to balance that, my personal expertise and interest with, the sort of theories and understandings that they're hoping to learn when they come to Australia, because a lot of the students are international, at least at this point.
mhm.
Um, but I try to find ways outside of professional work, I guess. So I'm on the Indonesia Council at the moment as secretary. I'm one of the what are we called? Reference group members for the Australian Consortium of In-Country Indonesian Studies, ACICIS.
Mhm.
And I have tried to organize a few sort of informal events at UNSW around Indonesia-related themes. We do have a huge postgraduate cohort. Well, not huge, but I'd say maybe like in the 50 plus maybe PhD
Hmm.
students at UNSW from Indonesia. So there is
Mm.
interest for
Mm.
it, but they're scattered across different faculties, and um, there isn't really a concerted effort to from the institution, I guess, to kind of find ways to bring all these people together. So yeah, I'm trying to do that through sort of more informal mechanisms, but yeah, it also takes time, which I'm sure you can appreciate.
It does, and I think, as you say, it is often the informal channels doesn't necessarily align so well with formal workloads and things like that, does it? So it's
Yeah,
but it's there.
exactly.
It's often there, and I think it's the classic issue of people whose research interests are sort of aligned with Asian studies, but not necessarily their job description. So it's but anyway, it sounds like you're finding ways to do it. Uh, which I suppose leads to the next question, which is about the ASAA. So could you tell us about
Yeah.
your the involvement you've had in the life of
Involvement. Yes.
yes, in the ASAA over time?
So I think that the ASAA conference was the very first conference I went to as a postgraduate student, if I'm not mistaken. So that was sort of, I guess, my first introduction to ASAA. I don't recall really knowing anything about it before the conference. Um, and I think it was one of those situations where Michelle Ford was like, "You should go to this conference." I'm like, okay. Um, so I went, and it was good. I can't remember exactly what paper I gave, but I definitely remember coming out of it thinking that was a good experience. So I think it would have been the year after, or maybe 2 years after they had nominations, excuse me, for the postgraduate representative. So I put my hand up for that. I can't remember if it was competitive or not. I may have been the only person who applied. Um, so I was on the council as the postgraduate rep. I want to say between maybe 2013 and 2015, somewhere around there.
Mhm.
Um, I don't remember doing very much. And I think at that stage, I remember going to the first meeting and just being very confused about what was going on. Um, there were lots of sort of, I guess, legacy issues that I didn't really understand,
Mm, mm,
and
mm,
things
mm.
about the Constitution, which I had not read at that stage. So it was a very one of those meetings where people are just talking about things and acronyms, and you're just like, I
Yeah, yeah,
can't I
very.
can't really follow what's happening.
I
But
real.
I like eventually got my head around some of the issues, and then I think it was time for me to leave, and I was writing up my thesis, so I didn't renew, but
Mm.
I stayed a member, and I think went to at least two more ASAA conferences in the interim. And then at the end of 2018, Ed Aspinall approached me about being the treasurer, because I think they had, well, you were on the council at that time, David. I think they had put
I
out a
think I
call and
was.
no one had responded. And
So,
then I was like, sure.
so-
That sounds interesting. And luckily at the time at SEAC, um, we had an administrative officer who also was given a few hours by the center to help me with that role. So it didn't seem as big a commitment, although it did actually end up being quite a big commitment. So I took over that role and started to, yeah, see that there were some issues with the website, namely, and there had been, I guess, in the year or two previous, a sort of move over to automatic renewal of membership, which had made a lot of people angry. So I mean, it was a really interesting role because I think the first couple of months of being treasurer was just dealing with people sending really angry emails about why they had been charged, why they'd been
That's
charged
true. Yes,
automatic
yes.
renewal for their membership, and just trying to figure out like, and I suppose, I mean, now we're so used to it, right? Like you sign up for Netflix or you sign up for something on the
Mm.
internet, and it's almost implied that it's going to be automatically renewed unless you go in and cancel it or something. But I
Hmm.
think at that time that was not
Mm.
so normal. So people were just like, there were some very angry people getting their credit cards automatically charged.
Mm.
So I think that was probably the first couple of months of my treasurership, but you know, that kind of died down over time, and then it became more about how to improve the processes so that we didn't have so many issues. Um, and yeah, and then I think I was treasurer for 2 terms, 4 years.
That sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah,
from what I
yeah,
recall. Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah.
yes. And now I'm not no longer officially involved with the ASAA, but I am on the Indonesia Council. So sort of, I don't know what that relationship is. Parent-child. Kind of
Something
like
like that. So there's some it's all part of the same. I won't say
same
dysfunctional family, but
family.
the family at least anyway. Yeah, without any adjectives required. So no,
Yeah.
but no, it's no. Thank you. That's great to know. Uh, Thinking sort of big picture stuff here. What's your view of the position of Asian studies in Australia at the moment, and maybe how's that changed in the time you've been involved?
Yeah, I mean, it just always, it feels like it's been a constant struggle. I mean, I even remember in undergraduate joining protests and signing
Mm,
petitions to save Indonesian studies at the University of Sydney, which thankfully still exists, but I think there's always a bit of a shadow over, you know, yeah. I don't know exactly what's going on there at the moment, but it was always kind of like low numbers and is this financially viable and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's always since I've had, you know, connection to Asian studies in the academic sense, it's always felt like there's been a struggle and sort of this constant need to justify why it matters and why it's important and um, you know, particularly to decision makers and the government,
mm,
and which to me just seems so crazy because it's like it's so obvious to me what we need to know
mm,
about Asia. Like it doesn't even seem like it's not even a question in my mind how people in Australia knowing more about Asia or understanding how different cultures work or how or different languages can be beneficial. But I think there is this constant need to justify existence, and I don't know if that's purely fine. Like it seems like from the university
mm,
perspective, it's often financial, you know, and like,
mm.
can you financially justify, you know, why we're spending all of this money on teaching 5 students? Um, but yeah, at the same time, I think that looking at the value of, I mean, learning about any language or culture in terms of finances just seems very, um, I don't know, what's the word? It seems silly to try and
Mm,
justify it that way. So I think um, that's sort of my observation on the field of Asian studies. I think that in terms of, the kinds of things that I was involved in through ASAA, where, um, uh, Melissa and Ed were putting together that report on the state of Asian studies. There's sort of this constant, getting news from people at different institutions saying that this is under threat or that's under threat. And I'm not sure how many letters Kate wrote as president in defense of different programs, and you probably do the same. Yeah, it's just, I guess it feels undervalued.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's I think that is a bit of a recurring theme, shall we say? And maybe particularly in Indonesia, I could be wrong, but I mean, I suppose that
I
looms
mean,
particularly large, so doesn't it? Big part of the story.
it it is, and I think that there's a lot of different arguments for, or not arguments, I guess explanations for why things are going the way that they're going. I mean, at UNSW, they no longer teach Indonesian, and I think they haven't since around 2006 or 7 was when they shut
Hmm.
down the Indonesian department. Um,
Right.
so, I mean, as far as I know, the University of Sydney is the only university in sort of the Sydney metro area that teaches Indonesian now. Um, uh, and I think it's, I mean, I don't know that it's ever been like a huge subject or there's been huge interest. I mean, uh, I can't, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine there being more than, I guess, 30 students in an Indonesian classroom at university,
Mm,
although maybe
mm,
that was the case decades ago. But I think, personally, I think that this is not a university issue necessarily. I think it's got a lot to do with the way that languages are valued in the education system in Australia
mm,
generally.
mm,
Um, and just this sort of commitment to monolingualism that I cannot really understand, which is exacerbated, I suppose, by the fact that there's so many, computer programs where you can just translate like that. I think people who don't see language as being anything but a utilitarian tool would point to, Google Translate and be, why would I bother learning a language when I can just put the words into Google Translate? It's a waste of my time, ignoring the fact that being able to understand another language is not just about words. It's about all kinds of,
mm,
all manner of things, and, you know, let alone interpersonal relationships and the way that you can make friends or engage with people when you're in that country or when people that went from that country come to Australia. So yeah, it's just really disappointing, I think, to look at particularly the politics around it. And I don't know, I kind of think that being able to speak another language is not just about knowing the words and knowing the grammar. It's about having the space in your mind to consider that people might think about things in a different way or like have a different approach to life or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, now I'm gonna start
mm.
ranting.
No. That's all very good. Thank you very much. I really I think your points that you make about whether Australia writ large decides that monolingualism is a problem or not. If you do, then there are certain consequences, and you sort of say, well, we have to do certain things. But if you don't think it's an issue, if then we just carry on, and we can let the programs wither. So there's a foregrounded question there that sort of needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And Asian
And
studies,
then of course
yeah,
recognizing that Asian studies is not just language.
yeah, but also I think the point you make about the technology too, and it can help you sort of create a very pretty little byline for your email, but it's not necessarily going to help you sort of in the moment when you're in country and you don't have a translator, like a electronic translator
Mm.
sort of
Hmm.
available to you. So, okay, so no, they're really good points. Uh, last question then, I suppose. Conscious of time. If you had your way, what would be a couple of things that we could do, sort of as people through either through ASAA or sort of probably more than that, sort of with an ear of government. What can be done to improve the position of Asian studies in Australia, sort of in the medium to long term?
Oh my gosh,
What-
such a hard question. I mean, I think for languages particularly, that it needs to start from primary school. I mean, I think there
Mm,
needs to be an emphasis from, and there is in some schools, I know that different schools have different emphasis, and to some extent it might depend on the demographic makeup of the school, whether particular languages are taught. But I think there needs to be from the government this overarching commitment to first recognizing just how useful having these sorts of skills. And it's not just about having the skill of being able to speak Mandarin or being able to speak Japanese, but having the ability to kind of think through the logic of different languages and think through the meaning of how language is tied to culture. And I mean, I think luckily in Australia, because it is a multicultural society, there are going to be families and parents like my parents who do that instinctively because they want their children to be able to operate in different sort of cultural realms. But I think the government still does have a role. And I think that, I mean, it's a big ask for ASAA to kind of engage with the education the sections of the government that are responsible for education at the primary school and high school level. But I mean, I really do think that that's where, if things are really going to change, that's where it needs to start. Um, and even if you go back, I think I mentioned, a few decades where Indonesia was a really booming language, um, that was very much because primary schools and high schools were
mm,
teaching Indonesian,
mm.
um, as part of students, weekly or probably not daily, but weekly curriculum. And yeah, of course, there are going to be some students that come through the classroom and are like, this is boring, I'm not interested.
Mm.
But you will catch some people. And I think that's probably the only way that things are really going to be able to shift in a sort of meaningful and long-term way at this stage that I can see. Um, Also being someone who doesn't study this area academically. But I also think that there's, I don't know exactly how you would do it, but I think this sort of sense that, um, I mean, this is something that I used to talk a lot about with my colleagues at USAID, that there's this kind of sense that European languages you learn for the culture and for
Mm.
um, the experience and the sort of prestige. And Asian languages you learn for the utility.
Mm. Right.
And
Yes.
I think that then there needs to be something where we start to break that distinction down because I mean, there's no reason, I mean, that I can see for anyone to think that, I don't know, French culture is necessarily richer
Mm,
than,
mm, mm.
Japanese culture or Korean culture or Indonesian culture and like, any other country.
Yes.
There's a romanticism that's attached to it, which I guess has a long history, but in real terms, I think that all of the all of the Asian countries that I've just named probably have more diversity, more complexity, um, than a lot of European countries. I mean, I don't want to make enemies by saying that, but I mean, like,
Mm.
Indonesia has over 200 and something different ethnic groups.
Mm.
Um, and so I think I don't know like how to describe it exactly, but it just feels like this distinction between European languages and other languages. We need to somehow break that down. I don't know what I don't know what the solution is, but kind of being forefront, um, being excellent teachers and advocates. I mean, I can't see myself having stayed in Indonesian studies if I had a teacher that I thought was boring. I mean, I guess those are the things that educators can do on an individual level. Kind of do what you can to make the topics that you teach and the languages that you teach as interesting and as inspiring as possible. But yeah, it needs to be more of a social shift that I don't know. I'm just throwing up. I feel like I'm throwing up problems rather than solutions.
No, no, no. Look, I think you've named three different things there, which I think all very important. But also, as you say, they're bigger than they're bigger than we could sort of fix through one government initiative or any initiative from the ASAA. They're attitudinal changes, really, aren't they? Sort of or
Yeah.
sort of reweighting sort of the value that we attach to certain parts of the
Yeah,
world, yeah, and languages and
absolutely.
cultures attached to them, and that's a big shift that is required, uh, and yeah, probably not going to happen overnight, but
Yeah.
it's
I
fundamental.
think
But
maybe
yeah,
in
yeah,
Korean studies, I mean,
mm,
you'd be way more of an expert on this than me, but I mean, the sort of K-pop and K-drama wave that sort of come through in the last, I don't know, decade or so,
mm,
um, you know, which I know is very complicated and has a range of different sort of outcomes. But I
mm.
think seeing that and, people wanting to learn Korean now, not because they think that they're going to get a job out of it, but because they're actually passionate about and being able to understand the lyrics of their favorite songs or being able to watch a drama that,
Yes,
without subtitles or something like those seem like really small examples, but I think that to me is a much more compelling reason to learn a language than, oh, I might get a job out of it. I might get a
yeah,
job out of this, which is very much how at least Indonesian is marketed, I think, at this point in time. Like, it's all about Indonesia being our biggest neighbor and geopolitical ties and trade and stuff. And it's like,
yes.
I don't know, I
But
mean, maybe we could learn Indonesian because they have some really great films and culture and books that we might want to read.
yes, yes, in a way, it's less pressure, isn't it? Then, if you sort of have to, if you learn it because you want to, because you like the music or you like the film,
Yeah. And
that's a
and
less,
from that passion will
yeah,
come opportunities.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but I mean, that's not how I guess yeah, that's not the message I feel that young people are getting when it comes to language.
No, no, but again, that's maybe there is something that people in this field can do, as you say, because you've got that unique opportunity in the classroom, even if even if it's only 30 or 40 students who it might be, or it's often going to be less than that because some of them are going to switch off, but it's that seems to be the opportunity, as you say, to dare I say, to inspire and to sort of to make the case,
Yeah, and
advocate for.
put the pressure back on ourselves. It's like,
Yes, I'm conscious of that too. Look, Liz, thank you very much for your time today and the thoughts you've shared. I've really enjoyed the chance to hear what you've had to say. I think
yeah, it's been nice
ASA
chatting to
members
you
will
too,
too.
David.
Yeah,
I think I
yeah.
haven't seen you for a couple of years.
It feels that
Since I've
way.
been out.
Well, look, let's get in touch. And again, thanks for contributing to this project. I think it's when we put it all together, there'll be a lot of really useful, hopefully a lot of really useful sort of thoughts and reflections such as yours. Thanks again, Lisa. Bye.
Okay,
Welcome, of course, now.
bye.